Over 50 years ago, the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik in 1957 sparked the first space race, igniting a firestorm in the media at the time that drove the US to land astronauts on the Moon with Apollo 11 in 1969. Now a new space race has started between China and the US. The media are saying that this time China is going to win. Well, the US won the race to the Moon a long time ago. This time NASA has made it clear, through the Artemis Accords, it's going back to the Moon in a sustainable, long-term way. No more flags and footprints. In this video, we will examine China's approach to sending astronauts to the Moon's surface and their plans to build a long-term habitat there, and compare with NASA and the Artemis Partners approach. China's plan to send astronauts to the Moon. China has plans to put boots on the Moon's surface by 2030 and maybe even in 2029 if things go well. As delays hamper SpaceX's Starship, and the US administration considers scrapping key Artemis hardware like the Space Launch System, Orion Capsule and Lunar Gateway, it looks like China could succeed and land astronauts on the Moon's surface for the first time in over 50 years. Recently, China revealed their manned lunar lander named Lanyu, or Embracing the Moon, inspired by a 1965 poem by Chairman Mao Zedong. Comparable to Apollo's lunar module, Lanyu embodies China's aspiration and confidence in exploring the cosmos. Their new crew spacecraft, equivalent to the Apollo Command and Service module, is named Mengzhou, or Dream Vessel, which represents the Chinese nation's dream of landing on the Moon to start a new journey of space adventure. Mengzhou scales up the design of the Shenzhou spacecraft used for Tiangong space station missions, with two variants, one for lunar journeys and another for crew transport to Tiangong. China expects it will have all the hardware built and tested so that it can attempt a moon landing by 2030. Next, we'll examine China's concept of operations for this mission and compare it with NASA's Apollo approach. Comparing China's lunar CONOPS with NASA's Apollo missions. If you're familiar with the NASA Apollo missions, you will find many similarities, but there are a few differences. Unlike Apollo, which launched the Command and Service module and Lunar module together on a single Saturn V rocket, China employs a dual launch strategy. The Mengzhou crew spacecraft and the uncrewed Lanyu lunar lander launch separately on Long March 10 rockets, rendezvousing and docking autonomously in lunar orbit. Two astronauts then transfer from Mengzhou to Lanyu for a descent to the Moon's surface, where they conduct 1 to 3 days of operations, including sample collection and scientific experiments. The Lanyu's ascent stage returns them to Mengzhou, which performs an injection burn for the journey back to Earth, finishing in a skip re-entry and landing, likely in northern China. The entire mission spans approximately 10 to 14 days. From this graphic we can see the similarities and differences with the Apollo missions. Other than the dual launch concept and lunar orbit rendezvous, is very similar to the Apollo missions. One note is that the Lanyu lunar lander will have robotic arms and may have a pressurized cabin, which is different from the Apollo lunar lander. A key limitation is the Long March 10's capacity, which, at 27 tons to lunar transfer orbit, falls short of the Saturn V's 48 tons, limiting China's ability to deliver heavy infrastructure for its planned International Lunar Research Station. To address this, China is developing a more powerful rocket, which we'll explore next. Long March 9, China's super heavy launch vehicle. Think of the Long March 9 as China's answer to SpaceX's Starship vehicle. This is not far from the truth, as this vehicle was originally designed to be expendable, but after seeing the Starship vehicle under development, China pivoted to a modern reusable vehicle. But let's go back to 2016, when the Long March 9 was originally conceived. The vehicle is part of the Long March rocket family, stretching back all the way to 1970, with the Long March 1 orbiting the first satellite for China. The Long March 5 introduced heavy lift capabilities in the 2010s, but the Long March 9 marks a big increase in ambition that dramatically boosts payload mass to orbit and to the surface of the Moon. The first stage of the Long March 9 vehicle is powered by 30 YF-215 methane liquid oxygen engines and is fully recoverable, helped by the addition of aerodynamic flaps to guide the first stage back to Earth for a precise landing. The propellant tanks have a 10-meter diameter, larger than Starship, and will be the largest space structures developed in China to date. Targeting is maiden flight between 2030 and 2033, with a fully reusable two-stage variant planned for the early 2040s. The Long March 9 can loft 150 tons to low Earth orbit and 50 tons to lunar transfer orbit. This new vehicle far exceeds the capabilities of the Long March 10, making it essential for China's vision of a permanent lunar research station. In a recent article by Eric Berger on the space race, he mentions in passing that the Long March 9 has been cancelled. I have seen no evidence of this from primary sources. Perhaps he refers to the major redesign in 2022 as a cancellation. Without any actual proof, I continue to believe that the Long March 9 is still funded and under development. The Long March 9 plays a critical role in China's lunar-based plans, so I think it's unlikely it would be cancelled. China's Hare-like dash to the moon. China, with its command economy, is capable of mobilizing resources and labor more quickly and efficiently than the West can. This allows it to complete construction projects of a scale and size Western countries would find hard to match. But China is weak on technological advancements. As shown already, their concept of operations for the moon hasn't changed much since Apollo, and neither has the hardware. For instance, China's crewed transport vehicle, the Shenzhou, and its lunar variant, the Mengzhu, use a traditional launch escape tower that dates back to the Soviet Soyuz technology in the 1970s. That's 50-year-old technology. This contrasts sharply with modern US advancements, such as SpaceX's Starship, which uses propulsive landing systems for abort scenarios. Many other US space startups are working on reusability for their future vehicles, with China stuck with antiquated technology. It's true that the SLS architecture is traditional and hasn't progressed much from Apollo, and I will address that in a minute. China's brute-forcing engineering challenges by copying or stealing Western technology doesn't result in genuine innovation. Old technology can work, but it isn't cost-efficient and will not be able to compete in the open market. The Chinese startup sector has collapsed, with only 260 new companies founded and financed in 2024, a 99% drop from the 2018 peak of 51,302, according to IT Juicy data. Venture capital has dwindled, with yuan-denominated funds raising just $5 billion in 2024 compared to $125 billion in 2017. Foreign direct investment has also plummeted, with a record $168 billion in net outflows in 2024, reflecting a reluctance to invest in China amid tightening regulations, espionage laws, and data restrictions. The Chinese leadership is suspicious of private wealth accumulation and has introduced its Common Prosperity Initiative to undermine private wealth. The high-profile case of Jack Ma, whose criticism of regulators led to a $2.8 billion fine for Alibaba and a cancelled $34 billion IPO, underscores this hostility. As a result, foreign and domestic investors have withdrawn, with 80% of capital now coming from state-run funds. Without risk-tolerant startups and the possibility of becoming rich, it's hard to see how China will be able to innovate and keep up with the West. It's important to note that the Chinese space sector is well-funded because it's in line with China's geopolitical aims, with over 400 Chinese companies in the space sector, but these are closely aligned with the state and not really independent as we would understand it in the West. The Chinese space sector is thriving while the Chinese government funnels money to it, but it isn't self-sustaining. Once the money stops, the space sector collapses, as their technology is old and cannot compete with US companies like SpaceX, Rocket Lab, Blue Origin, and future vehicles from Relativity Space and Stoke Space. In short, China's Hare-like dash may secure a lunar landing, but without genuine innovation, it will struggle to sustain its lead against the US's dynamic, private sector-driven approach. NASA's Tortoise-like approach, slow and steady, wins the race. NASA, despite using a traditional architecture with its SLS system, which was mandated by congressional senators, is now committed to purchasing services from the private sector. NASA understands that the private sector's innovation and risk-taking approach will speed progress and reduce costs in the long term, helping NASA and the US outcompete command economies like China and Russia. NASA has retreated from its position of owning, designing, and building hardware. Instead, its new approach is to purchase services on the open market. For instance, cargo and crewed missions to the ISS were competed. From spacesuits to lunar rovers to lunar payload deliveries and crewed lunar landers, NASA purchases services from the private sector. These companies retain ownership of their technology, enabling them to offer services to private clients and other space agencies. For example, NASA-funded commercial space stations can partner with other space agencies and companies, improving their chances of reaching profitability, resulting in a truly private space sector where NASA is just one of many customers. A prime case is Interloon, a startup focused on harvesting helium-3 from the moon. Interloon secured a commercial contract with Maybell Quantum to sell lunar-sourced helium-3 on Earth, involving a private launch, a commercial lunar lander, and resource extraction, all without government involvement. This model exemplifies the sustainable, market-driven future NASA and its Artemis partners are building, in stark contrast to China's state-dominated space program. The US, in particular, and other Western countries to a lesser extent, have created a thriving space sector that attracts billions of dollars in private investment. Private funding of the space sector rivals NASA's budget, and SpaceX alone will soon generate more revenue than NASA thanks to its constellation of Starlink satellites. Brash, opinionated billionaires are welcome in the US. They have revitalized the space industry with fresh ideas, sparking an explosion of startups like at Rocket Lab, Blue Origin, Relativity Space, and Stoke Space. Unlike China, where suspicion of entrepreneurs and wealth stifles creativity, the US embraces visionaries, and the results? Rapid technological advancements and cost reductions. A recent executive order from President Trump streamlines launch approvals and cuts back environmental regulations, making it easier than ever to launch from the US. In contrast, China's top-down state control of every aspect of their space sector leaves no room for innovation. While China's space sector is thriving on state funding for now, its lack of independence risks collapse if state funding drops, unlike the self-sustaining US model driven by market forces. The hare or the tortoise? Who wins the lunar race? The race isn't over when China puts boots on the lunar surface. This race is about building a sustainable lunar base, including research outposts, scientific experiments, and lunar ice harvesting. That requires, at the minimum, habitats, pressurized and unpressurized rovers, lunar data relay satellites, launch and landing pads, roads, power stations with backup systems, lighting, and much more. One quick mission to get boots on the ground doesn't cut it. China doesn't win anything by using advanced AI, modern avionics, and vast amounts of capital to achieve what NASA already did over 50 years ago using slide rules. NASA is building a resilient ecosystem of space startups, established aerospace companies, commercial space stations, private sector customers spanning pharmaceuticals, suborbital and orbital tourism, Earth observation and communications. These startups and consortiums have a path to complete independence from government funding and subsidies if the low Earth economy continues to grow and expand. In the short term, China could, and likely will, get boots on the moon's surface before NASA's return. But in the medium term, they will lose as the entrepreneurship, innovation, and private sector funding outcompete and outpace China. Just as the US surpassed the Soviet Union 50 years ago, the tortoise, through steady, market-driven progress, will win the race for a sustainable lunar future. Final thoughts. Next time you read an article claiming that China will win the next space race, remember the tale of the hare and tortoise. China, the hare, may surge ahead, landing astronauts on the moon before NASA's return. But speed alone doesn't win this race. It doesn't matter if China lands astronauts on the moon in 2030 or even 2029. The US and its Artemis partners will be the ones to create a permanent, Sustainable presence on the moon, not China. Okay, I've given you my thoughts. What do you think? Who wins the next space race, China or the US? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this space video, consider buying me a coffee to help fund more episodes like this. The link is in the description. Space News Live is on Saturday evening or Sunday morning, depending where you watch from. The live stream is a great way for you to share your thoughts and opinions on the videos I posted this week or on any space topic in general. I highlight the most thought-provoking comments on videos I've received, along with late-breaking space news and previews of upcoming content. If you got the time, please tune in and say hi. Be sure to like and subscribe so you will see our upcoming videos. We make videos every week covering the space industry with an emphasis on the smaller space startups that aren't covered so well on other channels. See you soon.